Imagine rescuing a helpless child from the river, raising her as your own, only to discover years later that she was born to rule a kingdom. This is the tale of a humble fisherman whose kindness led to an extraordinary revelation. The wind howled over the river, carrying the scent of salt and the damp chill of the night. Dark clouds loomed above, blocking the moonlight as heavy raindrops pelted the waves. A fisherman, old but strong, steered his small boat through the turbulent waters, his calloused hands gripping the oar with experience honed over years of hardship. He had spent the entire evening casting his net, yet luck had not favored him. The sea had been restless, unwilling to surrender its treasures. As he prepared to turn back towards the shore, something unusual caught his eye, a small object floating amid the crashing waves. At first, he thought it was a piece of driftwood, another fragment lost to the storm. But as lightning illuminated the sky, he saw the unmistakable shape of a basket rocking dangerously with the current. A cry, barely audible over the storm, sent a chill down his spine. He hesitated for a moment, his heart pounding. Could it be what he feared? With urgency, he maneuvered his boat closer and reached out with his fishing hook, carefully pulling the basket towards him. As he lifted it onto the boat, the cries became clearer, a baby's wails, weak but persistent. He gasped as he removed the soaked cloth draped over the child. The infant was no more than a few months old, her tiny face pale from the cold. Yet, despite the storm raging around them, she clung to life with an unyielding spirit. The fisherman's breath caught when he noticed the fabric wrapped around her, a fine silk, embroidered with golden threads, far too luxurious for a common child. Attached to it was a pendant, an insignia he did not recognize, but its craftsmanship told him it belonged to someone of great importance. Who would abandon such a child? He searched the riverbanks for any sign of another boat, a desperate parent, or a frantic servant looking for the lost baby. But there was nothing, only the darkened shoreline, the endless waves, and the lonely wails of the infant. The old man felt a pang in his heart. Whoever had sent this child into the river had done so either in fear or desperation. He could not turn away, nor could he leave her to fate. With careful hands, he tucked her beneath his cloak, shielding her from the cold as he rowed back toward his village. By the time he reached the shore, the storm had begun to subside. The rain slowed to a drizzle, and the wind softened, whispering through the trees that lined the coast. He stepped out of his boat, cradling the baby against his chest, and made his way to his humble hut at the edge of the village. Inside, he lit a small fire, warming his cold fingers before unwrapping the infant. She had stopped crying now, staring up at him with wide, curious eyes. Something about her gaze unsettled him. It was not the look of an ordinary child. There was a quiet wisdom in those eyes, a depth that spoke of something greater than what she appeared to be. With a deep sigh, he spoke softly, though he knew she could not understand. "I don't know who you are, little one, or where you came from. But from this moment on, you are no longer alone." He fetched a woolen blanket, one he had saved from his late wife, and wrapped her in it. Then, with a tenderness he had not felt in years, he rocked her gently in his arms until she drifted into sleep. For the first time in a long while, the fisherman felt a purpose beyond his daily struggle. He had spent years braving the sea, toiling for his livelihood with no one to return home to. But tonight, that changed. Tonight, he had found something more valuable than all the fish in the ocean, a life that depended on him. Little did he know, the child he had rescued was not just any abandoned soul. She was born of royal blood, a hidden heir to a kingdom that was now desperately searching for its lost princess. And though the fisherman had no idea of the truth, fate had already set its course, one that would change both their lives forever. The morning sun peeked over the horizon, casting golden light over the quiet fishing village. Waves lapped gently against the shore, and the cries of seagulls filled the air as fishermen prepared for another long day at sea. Among them was the old fisherman, his sturdy hands expertly mending a net outside his small hut. Inside, the little girl he had rescued from the river years ago played with seashells, her laughter carrying on the breeze like the soft hum of a forgotten song. She had grown quickly, no longer the fragile infant he had pulled from the waves that fateful night. Now, she was a lively child with eyes as deep as the ocean, filled with a quiet wisdom beyond her years. Though she bore no resemblance to the villagers, no one questioned her presence. The fisherman had simply introduced her as his daughter, and the people, knowing his kind nature, had accepted her as one of their own. Her name was Sanaa, a name he had chosen after much thought. It meant brilliance, and from the moment he had held her, he had known she was destined for something extraordinary. Sanaa's days were spent beside the old man, learning the ways of the sea. She would rise before dawn to help prepare the fishing boat, carrying small baskets and coiling ropes with enthusiasm. Though he never expected her to take on the hard labor, she insisted, her determination unwavering. "I want to be strong like you, Baba," she would say, using the affectionate name she had given him. The fisherman would only smile, ruffling her hair before setting out into the waves. She would wait eagerly on the shore, scanning the horizon until his boat returned, her heart always filled with relief when he stepped onto the sand, safe and sound. When not helping with the nets, Sanaa spent hours wandering the shoreline, collecting shells and smooth pebbles. She would arrange them in patterns, lost in thought, as though searching for something she could not name. Sometimes she would stand by the water, staring out at the endless blue, feeling a pull she did not understand. "Why do I feel like something is missing, Baba?" she asked one evening as they sat by the fire, eating the fish he had caught earlier that day. The fisherman hesitated, watching the flames flicker before answering. "Perhaps because the sea is vast, and the world beyond this village is unknown to you." She frowned, stirring the coals with a stick. "Have you ever left this place?" "A long time ago," he admitted. "But I chose to stay. The sea gives me all I need." Sanaa nodded but did not speak further. Though she loved her home, a quiet longing lingered in her heart, whispering to her like the distant call of the waves. As she grew, the villagers noticed something remarkable about her. Unlike the other children, who hesitated to enter the water during storms or high tides, Sanaa seemed to possess an uncanny connection with the sea. She could predict the weather with startling accuracy, sensing an oncoming storm before the skies darkened. The fish always seemed to gather near her whenever she helped cast the nets, and even the most stubborn of waves calmed under her watchful gaze. Some called it luck, while others whispered of something greater. The fisherman, however, simply accepted it as part of who she was. To him, Sanaa was a blessing, a daughter who had given his life meaning after years of solitude. Yet, deep down, he knew she was different. It was not just her unusual skills, but the way she carried herself. Though she dressed in simple linen like the rest of the village children, there was an unshakable grace in her movements. She spoke with a quiet authority, even as a child, and her eyes, always searching, held a depth far beyond her years. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, the fisherman found Sanaa sitting on the rocks, staring out at the open sea. He approached, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You've been quiet today," he observed. She sighed, hugging her knees to her chest. "I keep having dreams," she admitted softly. "Strange dreams, of a place I've never seen before. A grand palace, with tall towers and golden banners. I hear voices calling my name, but I don't recognize them." The fisherman's heart clenched, but he remained silent. He had never spoken to her about the night he found her, never told her about the fine silk or the insignia she had carried. He had convinced himself that the past did not matter, only the present, only the love he had given her. But could the truth really be buried forever? Sanaa turned to him, eyes filled with uncertainty. "Baba, who am I?" He forced a smile, brushing a stray curl from her face. "You are my daughter, and that is all that matters." For now, it was enough. But deep within, he knew that the day would come when she would demand answers. And when that moment arrived, no amount of love would be able to keep her from seeking the truth. The village awoke to a morning unlike any other. The air was thick with anticipation. As news spread like wildfire, royal guards had arrived. Their presence was rare in such a humble place, and the sight of armored men riding through the dirt paths sent waves of curiosity and fear among the villagers. Sanaa stood at the edge of the shore, her feet sinking slightly into the wet sand. She had sensed something unusual even before the first rider had entered the village. A restless feeling had stirred within her, like the shifting tides before a storm. Now, watching the commotion from a distance, she felt her heart beat faster. The fisherman emerged from his hut, his expression wary. He had lived long enough to know that royal affairs seldom brought good fortune to common folk. Sanaa glanced at him, searching his face for reassurance, but found none. The leader of the guards, a man with sharp eyes and a crest embroidered onto his chest, dismounted his horse and addressed the village elders. His voice carried authority as he unrolled a scroll, displaying a symbol that few recognized but all instinctively respected, the royal emblem. "We seek a child," he announced, his gaze scanning the gathered villagers. "A girl, lost many years ago. She bears a birthmark, a golden insignia in the shape of a crescent upon her right shoulder." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some exchanged glances, whispering amongst themselves. Others remained silent, unwilling to involve themselves in matters beyond their understanding. Sanaa, who had remained still until that moment, felt a shiver run down her spine. Unconsciously, her hand drifted to her right shoulder, gripping the fabric of her simple tunic. The fisherman, standing beside her, noticed the movement. His stomach tightened. The birthmark. He had seen it before, the night he had pulled her from the river. It had been faint beneath the dim firelight, but unmistakable, a golden crescent, shimmering under the flickering flames. Over the years, he had convinced himself it was a mere coincidence, a quirk of nature. But now, as the royal guards described it in exact detail, he could no longer deny the truth. His grip on Sanaa's arm tightened slightly, an instinctive reaction. But she had already seen the flicker of fear in his eyes. She turned to face him, her gaze searching. "Baba," she whispered, her voice laced with confusion. "What is happening?" The fisherman inhaled sharply, knowing there was no escaping what was to come. He had never lied to her, not once in all the years he had raised her. But he had also never told her the full truth. Before he could answer, the guard's sharp gaze landed on Sanaa. He took a step closer, studying her with keen eyes. "You girl. Step forward." The villagers stepped aside, leaving Sanaa exposed. She hesitated, glancing up at the fisherman for guidance, but his expression was unreadable. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she took a tentative step. The guard examined her closely, his eyes narrowing. Then, with a measured tone, he asked, "Remove your sleeve." Sanaa hesitated. A strange mixture of fear and curiosity churned in her stomach. Slowly, she pulled down the fabric from her right shoulder, revealing the mark that had always been a part of her but had never held meaning, until now. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The guard's expression changed instantly, shifting from suspicion to certainty. He turned to his men and gave a sharp nod. "It is her." The words felt heavy, foreign. The air seemed to grow still as Sanaa tried to process what was happening. The fisherman stepped forward, his voice firm despite the turmoil within him. "She is my daughter." The guard regarded him with measured respect, but shook his head. "She is the lost princess of the kingdom, the rightful heir to the throne. She was taken from the palace as an infant and thought to be lost forever. But fate has brought her back." Sanaa's breath caught in her throat. Princess, heir to the throne. None of it made sense. She had spent her life fishing by the shore, running barefoot through the village, learning the ways of the sea. She was no princess. She turned to the fisherman, seeking an answer, but his face was filled with something she had never seen before, sorrow. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The old man swallowed hard. He had always known this day might come, but he had never been prepared for it. Slowly, he nodded. "I found you in the river, Sanaa, the night of the storm. You were wrapped in silk, with a crest I did not recognize. I knew you were from a world beyond this village, but I could not bear to lose you." Tears welled in Sanaa's eyes. Her world, the only one she had ever known, was unraveling before her. The guard extended a hand. "Your Highness, you must come with us. The kingdom has waited for you for years. You are meant for something greater than this place." She turned back to the fisherman, her heart aching. "I don't want to go." He forced a smile, though his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You have always belonged to something bigger than this village, my child. But no matter where you go, you will always be my daughter." Sanaa's heart wavered, torn between the life she had always known and the truth she could no longer deny. Sanaa stood frozen, her heart hammering in her chest. The weight of the moment pressed down on her like the tide against the shore. The life she had always known, days spent helping the fishermen mend nets, laughing with the villagers, feeling the salty breeze against her face, was slipping away with every second that passed. The guard's outstretched hand remained steady, his expression patient but unwavering. "Your Highness, we must leave at once. The kingdom needs you." Her mind swirled with unanswered questions. A princess, heir to the throne. How could she be part of a world she had never even known existed? She turned to the fisherman, the only father she had ever loved, searching for a reason to stay. His face, weathered by years of hardship and sacrifice, held nothing but sorrow and pride. He stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Sanaa," he said softly, "I have always known this day would come." Her throat tightened. "But I belong here. With you." He offered a small, bittersweet smile. "You belong to something greater, my child. This village, this shore, it was never meant to hold you forever. The river brought you to me for a reason, but now it must take you where you are truly meant to be." Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the faces of the villagers who had gathered around. Some looked at her with awe, others with sadness. She had been one of them, and yet, she had always been different. The whispers she had ignored for years, the way she seemed to command the waves, the strange dreams that haunted her, suddenly made sense. A soft breeze stirred her hair, and for the first time, she felt the pull of something beyond the sea she had always called home. She turned back to the guard, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if I don't know how to be a princess?" His expression softened. "You will learn, Your Highness. And you will be surrounded by those who will guide you. Your parents, your true parents, have long awaited your return." Sanaa inhaled sharply. Parents. The word felt foreign on her tongue. She had never known another family beyond the fisherman. The thought of meeting them filled her with both fear and longing. The fisherman squeezed her hand, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "Go, my child. Find who you are meant to be." A single tear slipped down her cheek, but she nodded. She knew, deep in her heart, that if she refused to go now, she would spend the rest of her life wondering about the truth she had left behind. With a heavy heart, she turned toward the guards. One of them brought forward a horse, its saddle adorned with intricate embroidery fit for royalty. Hesitantly, she allowed herself to be helped onto it, the motion unfamiliar, yet strangely fitting. As she sat atop the grand beast, she looked down at the fisherman, her voice trembling. "I will come back for you." His eyes, filled with unspoken love, shone with unshed tears. "You will always have a home here, Sanaa. No matter where life takes you." The lead guard signaled for departure, and with a gentle tug of the reins, Sanaa's horse began to move. The villagers watched in silent reverence, their faces a mix of sadness and pride. The only home she had ever known slowly faded behind her, swallowed by the winding path leading away from the shore. She kept her gaze forward, even as her heart ached. The journey to the kingdom was long, the landscape shifting from the familiar coastline to rolling green hills and towering forests. The more they traveled, the more she realized how little she knew of the world beyond her village. The roads were lined with traders, noblemen, and common folk, all moving with purpose. She listened to the guards as they spoke of the kingdom's history, of the sorrow that had gripped the land since the loss of their princess. And now, she was to return as the heir they had been waiting for. When the palace finally came into view, its golden towers gleaming under the afternoon sun, her breath caught in her throat. It was just as she had seen in her dreams. A grand courtyard awaited them, lined with banners displaying the same crest she had unknowingly carried all her life. Servants and noblemen gathered, their eyes wide with disbelief and hope. At the top of the palace steps stood a man and a woman, her parents. The queen gasped the moment she saw her, hands flying to her mouth in shock. The king took a step forward, his stern expression betraying the raw emotion in his eyes. "Sanaa," the queen whispered, her voice breaking. "My child." Everything in her wanted to run, to escape the overwhelming reality pressing in around her. But something, some unspoken connection, kept her rooted in place. She dismounted slowly, her hands trembling as she took tentative steps toward them. The queen, unable to hold back any longer, rushed forward and wrapped her in a tight embrace. It was warm, unfamiliar yet deeply comforting. Sanaa stood stiffly at first, but as she felt the queen's tears against her skin, something inside her softened. The king approached more hesitantly, his gaze filled with wonder. "We thought we had lost you forever," he murmured. Sanaa swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know." The queen pulled back, cupping her face with gentle hands. "You are home now." Home. The word carried so much weight. She turned her gaze toward the horizon, where she knew the village lay beyond the hills. She had left behind the man who had raised her, the home that had shaped her. But as she looked at the people before her, the family she had never known, she realized that her journey was only just beginning. And though she did not know what the future held, she carried the fisherman's words in her heart. No matter where life took her, she would always be his daughter. And one day, she would return to the shore where her story had begun.